And we are back from break. I'm David Boles. This is Boles.tv. It's BOLES. Boles.television, Monday through Friday and Saturday and Sunday here at high noon Eastern. So over the weekend, I had an interesting conversation early Sunday morning, which is usually never a good time to get into a heated conversation. It wasn't heated, but some people try to turn it into heat. Because once these things start, you really have to keep going if you're right, because those people going against you who are wrong will keep going without you. So you always have to be there just to gently push back, if it's possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you have to punch people. But now that I'm old, when it gets to the point of having to punch people, I just say, I'll be back. Bye. See ya. And never go back. So over the weekend, like early Saturday morning, like 3 a.m. Eastern, Midjourney, the AI bot that I currently use to create AI art for sharing on social media when I'm not banned, and for selling on OpenSea and Rarible. And the new version 4 is supposed to be better at rendering faces and eyes and personalities. And there are 4 versions. You can use 1, 2, 3, or 4. 4 is the latest. It's not as precise or as beautiful in resolution as version 3. And I've only been using Midjourney for about 3 or 4 weeks. 3 weeks. So I'm sort of, in my own mind, an expert with version 3. But version 4 is slightly different. Word order doesn't matter as much. You can use natural language, where you just, type, show me a cat on a mountaintop eating a bowl of cherries, and it will pop it up. You don't have to set things in a certain order like you did with version 3. So we're all sort of beta testing, really, version 4, but publicly. And people are coming up with some interesting things. And so I decided, in part of my test, that I was going to do a carnival series from, say, the 1980s, being specific because I'm, testing, exploring what's going on. And I hadn't done any of this with version 3, so this is totally new. Now that I'm going back and redoing things I did with version 3 and getting much more interesting results. But as I'm testing my carnival midway, I'm getting some very curious and interesting default results. Now, I'll show you some of the results right now. But this is going to eventually take us into a place that's going to be more curious. So the prompt has to do with a Polaroid photo, 1989, I think, Carnival Midway. This prompt is cheerleaders holding a teddy bear. So you can see there's a wide variety. The eyes are right. The faces are very beautiful. We have a variety of ethnicities, skin colors. I also did a little same thing, everything, same prompt, except the rubber lady from, like the House of the Bazaar. Now, I thought it was going to be a lady all kind of bent in different shapes. But this AI decided to make the rubber lady like a DM lady. Gordon says, I see you're having some of the same issues I have. Most of these are the teddy bears holding the young women and not the reverse. Yes, that's very true. It's very weird. So the rubber lady turned into women wearing sort of skimpy rubber outfits, like, some kind of dominatrix is what I'm trying to say. DM, whatever. However, the results, as you can see, are very interesting. Wide variety of ethnicities, different kinds of skin tones and skin colors, which I appreciate. Age, usually when you say, a woman wearing something, you get a very stereotypical one face of woman. Here is an older woman with fun glasses. Sometimes the woman is like a blow-up dolls thing, but it's not a doll thing. It's more like a puppet, I guess. This one's looking a little dominatrix-y. Here's an Asian woman, I guess, wearing a rubber suit. Here's the teddy bear again. Sometimes holding the teddy bear, sometimes not holding the teddy bear. Here we are with the rubber suit woman again. And then because I'm trying to make this a series, so I go a little earlier, like the carnival barker, the midway barker. Now look at these. These are just wild. These are the rubber women. Oh yeah, and then I wanted a goth girl eating cotton candy. Now that was a big mistake because, as you can see, fingers do not render well at all. So if you have someone eating something, you're going to see their fingers. Big mistake. I tried to play with it, roll, re-roll. Sometimes I got 4 fingers or fingers hidden behind the cotton candy. This is still the rubber lady. I love this photograph with the red on the cheek. It looks so natural. And then so these are more of the goth girls eating their cotton candy, okay? I want a wide variety of people. And I started this whole thing with the carnival barker on the carnival midway. And this is the early ones that I got. Strange guy, sometimes wearing a mask, very freaky, and sometimes no guy at all, just a midway. Like the guy is the face of the kiosk. Sometimes it's just got weird stuff. But this is the fun of rolling all these AI images and seeing what comes out of the computer. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what started the whole big argument online. And I was making an observation, and today you can't make an observation because DLive is going to ban you for being political. Instagram's going to cut you off. No one wants an observation. Everyone wants you just to shut up and be quiet and just post, pictures of cats, which I do most of the time. So I was doing prompts and just replacing carnival barker, goth girl, rubber lady, cheerleader with teddy bear. And then to try to give a little variety for young men, I thought, what about, thugs? That was the prompt. And as you may have seen, every single prompt that came back from version 4 of Midjourney had the thug prompt indicating black men. Every single prompt. Re-rolling, rolling, re-rolling, 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 re-rolling. When I did that with the cheerleaders, sometimes got an Asian, got a light-skinned black woman, Filipino maybe. Same thing with the rubber lady. Roll it again, roll it again, roll it. Okay, why? Age differences, different skin tones, different cultures, different races. Roll after roll after roll. For thug, I get back black men. And I found that really, curious and fascinating. Because in these other shots, the crowds are mostly white people. And in these shots with the thugs in the front, in the foreground, the crowd is black. Gordon says, I just did a Google image search for thugs hanging out and same sort of results. And that was the conversation that we had in the Mid-Journey forum, 5 a.m. Sunday morning. Here are the 4 role results. Now, none of these are real people. These are all artificial images created by the Mid-Journey bot version 4. So I was making the observation, it's really interesting that the AI thinks that a thug in 1989 on a carnival midway is a black man. And I was immediately attacked by people, I guess, one person who claimed to know, oh, no, that's what thugs are. Thugs are black men. What do you think's going on? Look at Tupac. He did a whole album called Thug Life. And another person said, oh, you don't understand how these things work. These AI bots go out and find millions and millions and millions of images, and most of them are pre-2019. So you can't blame Mid-Journey for just returning what's out there. And I said, I'm not blaming Mid-Journey for anything. I'm making an observation. If you want to have Asian thugs, put it in your prompt. You put down Asian thugs. You put down Filipino thugs, and you'll see you're going to get a different answer. I said, I didn't put down black thugs. I just put down thugs. And we're testing this. We're experimenting with this. And I find that after reroll after reroll, the only answer so far is young black men for thugs. And then this other person said, well, sometimes you have to use the slur. Sometimes you have to use the stereotype to get the result you want. I said, I wasn't going after any sort of stereotype. I was just going after the idea of thugs. Because to me, my Midwestern upbringing, a midway carnival thug is a guy in a leather jacket, a denim coat, smoking a cigarette. Probably white. Now, is that my prejudice, or is that the way it was? And then after reroll, and then I put this on the conversation as well that we're having on Discord, I finally got, right here, a thug roll, and maybe the devs were listening to this conversation because it went on for about an hour and a half. White faces in the thug pose. So I said, now, isn't that interesting that the AI, because I keep rolling, knows that I want something else, uses a different seed, uses a different way of perhaps presenting information. However, I said, what concerns me is that the default currently, and I know things change and evolve, is for thug to return a young black man. And then another person, I think was a moderator, who said, well, don't do a search on murderer or you're going to get back something you really don't like. Now, I didn't search for murderer because I know there are banned words. And to me, murderer would be a banned word. If you use banned words too often, you will be locked out of Mid-Journey forever because a lot of people try to create porn and gore, and I don't want that. They don't want that. I know you can't use the word blood, and you cannot use the word naked in a prompt because I've been punished for those. So I did not look up murderer on Mid-Journey because I really don't care. I don't want to know. And then I made the point that the interesting thing about this all is the AI presumption, the artificial intelligence presumption of what the AI thinks you want returned to you. And right now, the presumption, I guess, over the weekend on a Sunday morning in Mid-Journey AI version 4, the first presumption was that a thug from 1989 at a Midway Carnival is a group of young black men. And I said, I'm not blaming the Mid-Journey people because they're not indicating any bias on their end. The bias is on the collection, not the collector. So maybe things will, as people say, well, it's just reflecting the way it was. I said, well, reflecting the way it might have been, but not the way it should be now. This is not historical documentation. There are gatekeepers who decide in 2019 and before what should be published, what words should be associated with whatever image. And it seems the trend was that in 1989, a thug at a carnival was a black man. And it concerned me. And then another person kind of said, well, that's kind of interesting how history works. And then it gave me my great opportunity to share my most relevant argument about all of this. And that is historically, and this is a concern for historians, that people, regular people, ordinary people, are not fairly or accurately representative in history because their lives were not thought to be important enough to preserve and remember and reflect upon. And if you look generally at the history, the last 100 years, the last 3,000 years, what survives? What do we learn about? We learn about the kings of Egypt. We learn about their gold. We're excited by the discovery of another tomb with jewels in it. How did the poor people live? How did the slaves live? People, historians, not terribly interested in how regular people, poor people, lived and survived. We even have that problem in the 1950s. Oh, look at this elegant mansion. Look at all these pieces of furniture that we've preserved. We've made their house, their mansion, a museum. Come and enjoy all the fruits and the spectacles of 1930s and 1940s. Well, what about the people who also lived and worked in those houses as servants or slaves or employees? What happened to their life? How do I get an AI return in version 4 of Midjourney to reflect who they are and what they mean? And as a little test, I did a search using Depression-era photographer names, invoking poor children, 1930s depression. And let me show you the very first thing that popped up. As an AI result, this image, which is a famous image. I used a different photographer. I did not use this photographer's name, but that's what gets sent back. Because these faces, these images, were not routinely recorded. Now, famous people, rich people, 1930s, you're going to find a lot of pictures. You're going to find a lot of elegant homes, but you're going to find a lot of young, poor people in the Depression who are surviving. There was a cadre of 5, 6, 7, 8 photographers that went out there and tried to take these pictures. But it's very limited. And when the AI tries to give you something, there's not a lot of variety. It's these faces. And not one of them, in any of these searches I did, returned anything other than a poor white child. There were no blacks, no people of color, nothing else returned. Just tired, tiny, white faces. So where does that leave us? Oh, we think artificial intelligence is great. And I think that's, as one of the moderators in the Midjourney that said, you know, the pyramids of Egypt used to be covered in white limestone and very beautiful. And that moderator was trying to get the AI to recreate how those pyramids looked based on information that it could pull from various different sources. And I said that is the magic and the beauty of AI, is to create things that were, but that we don't know about. So is it possible to find a 1930s poor, destitute person of color that is both realistic and also amplified based on what we knew then, but may not be recorded, and what we need to know now? So can AI recreate what wasn't there? Yeah. But is it an actual and truthful replication of what we need it to be today. And then I was still attacked by people. I said, look, history and AI do not live in a vacuum. And as an example I'll share with you now, that's sort of stark, but I think makes the point. Let's say you were to write a play about two gay men today, living today, right? And the whole story is how they have unprotected sex with thousands of different people. End of play. Because of how we live today and what we've gone through as a nation and what that community has gone through, you cannot write a gay sex story today about promiscuous men and not in some way mention AIDS and HIV, because the circumstances have changed. Now in the 1950s, you could write that play. 1960s, you could write that play. But the 1980s and after, you cannot write that play, because there will be outrage and fury. And now some people will say, well, now you're going to do that, you got to talk about a little monkeypox. You got to throw that in there, because plays do not exist today in a vacuum. Gordon says that's true. And even there are gay plays from the 60s that are promiscuous and they talk about sexual encounters, boys in the band, what happened after that. And they have problems today because the world has changed around them. And there are people who say, well, you can still produce those plays today because at the time that they were originally produced, they existed in a certain time and context. Whereas today, the context is different, but maybe you can appreciate it for some sort of historical record. So the historical record when it comes to AI is both true and distorted, because what you ask for may not be available, and what you get back may not be the truth. And that's why we have to discover things and talk about things. And as I said, when I kept re-rolling my 1989 Carnival Thugs on the Midway, and I kept getting back black men, until one time I got back a couple of white guys, and I put that on the forum. I said, hey, this is what happens. We learn as we roll. Technology teaches as it learns. And that's a good thing. And I did not, as I said, change my prompt, even though y'all told me to, because it had become a thing now. And that thing I wanted to explore merely on an educational basis to see if and when the algorithm would change. And it eventually did, which is a good thing for all of us, because that shows that nothing is cemented, nothing is immobile, nothing is really suspended in amber. There are ways to get out of it and to appreciate what we have. Gordon says default thug should not always mean the same thing. I agree. And I'm very certain that by now, if you go back into Midjourney version 4 and do a search like I did, a prompt, you're not going to get back image after image of young black men as thugs. And I think that's the right thing to do. There were people arguing with me, that's not historically correct. And I'm saying AI does not always have to be about accuracy of what was, but to present the truth of what is. And now we're going to take a very brief break. When we come back, oh gosh, so many things to talk about.